Thank you, everybody, for coming tonight. We're really looking forward to. We've got Lone Tree Photo Club member Elane Graves, who's going to cover some of her secrets on single light source photography. Note that Elane will also be following up tonight's presentation on Saturday with a workshop. More details on that. I'm going to cover that here in a moment. But again, that will be a hands-on workshop, whereas tonight is more presentation style. More details on that in a few minutes. Other upcoming events. We've got April 20th, as I just mentioned, this Saturday, the workshop on single light source photography with Elane Graves. On May 1st, so that's the first Wednesday in May, we have our next exhibition night. So again, exhibition nights, for those that haven't participated in those before, we have, you'll submit up to 4 images. They're not judged, they're not critiqued. Submit those. When your images come up, feel free to share any story or any information in that caused you to take the photo, any special post-processing techniques that you might have used, share it with the group. And then we open it up to the group just to offer suggestions and comments and so forth on each of those images. And so again, that is exhibition night. That is May 1st. May 15th, we have Lone Tree Photo Club member Corino Zaragoza, who will be presenting on wildlife photography. And June 5th is our next competition, and that one is open, so there's no themes on that one. So anything goes, as long as obviously it's appropriate in that, but that will be on June 5th. So I mentioned earlier in that Elane, after presenting tonight, there will be a hands-on workshop on Saturday, single light source. That Saturday, that's going to be here at this same facility, which is the Lone Tree Civic Center. And class limit is 10 attendees. I think we have a couple spots still left for that. I just signed up today, so I took one of those slots, but there still are a couple left. The time of that will be 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. And it really is a bargain when you see what she presents tonight, and then thinking about, the hands-on demonstration. The cost of $30 really is a bargain for the education that she's going to be providing on that day. And again, what she's going to be doing during the workshop is sharing her knowledge on single external flash. We'll all be able to use some of the gear that she'll be sharing with us tonight. Some of us are also going to bring in some of our own gear. If you sign up for the course and have your own lighting gear, lighting triggers and so forth, and that, feel free to bring those. She will also be providing some of the props that she'll be using to do some of the product style photography. But if you have anything specifically that you want to have photographed in that type of lighting environment, feel free to bring it, as long as it's not too large, I suppose.
Yeah,
tabletop size type items in that. The things that she'll be covering there will be principles of light, natural versus artificial, off-camera flash options and modifiers, techniques and settings, the one light demonstration, and post-processing if time permits. Again, some of those things she'll be covering here tonight, but that's kind of a list of what to expect in the workshop. Another thing that another workshop that we have out there is in September 6th, 7th, and 8th, night photography workshop with Lone Tree Club member Darren White. And he's offering, he does obviously the workshops, night photography workshops he's been doing for years. And he's offering this series to Lone Tree members specifically at a discounted price. It's $99 for one night, $150 for 2 nights, or $229 for all 3 nights. So again, September 6th, 7th, and 8th, you don't have to go all 3 nights. You can go 1, 2, or 3 at those various price points. Each of those night workshops will start at 6:30 p.m. Sunset and blue hour foregrounds, and then runs to about 3 a.m. So it goes pretty late into the night. Obviously, that's the best time to photograph the stars. And he said that there will be opportunities to photograph both the Milky Way, the core sets around midnight, and then also star trails. And as far as the location, he's got a few locations out on the Eastern Plains. He photographs a lot of, barns and places, abandoned properties and that out in Eastern Colorado. So the locations will be out that direction. There's more information on that, I believe, does our website have a link to that right now? Yeah, on our website, there's a link and then it goes to his website and there's more information there to sign up. Let's see here. I'm gonna, before I introduce Elane for tonight, well, I've got a couple of other things here that we've got. We've got the Art Bala is selling a Epson P7000 printer. It's a 24-inch, so 24-inch wide by as long as you want to go, I suppose, as long as the rolls of paper are. But large format 10-color inkjet printer. He's got it on sale for $1,500. It also includes 50% ink supply, 7 24-inch rolls of paper. And I've got some information, but if you're interested in that, you can contact Art Bala. We can maybe put that on the chat, or we'll figure out a way to get the information out there. But Art Bala club member who's here tonight is selling a real nice printer. So I've got some of the brochures here in that, but if anybody is interested in taking a look. Next thing I've got here is we just had our competition, and this was the competition that we had 2 weeks ago, and the themes on that were motion and leading lines. Beginner, intermediate, color. Judges award is Tamara Rimpley with mid-air collision. I don't think Tamara's here tonight. First place, Carolyn Ryman, What a Splash. Congratulations, Carol. Second place, we have Jeff Scott with Pony Express. I think Jeff is on the Zoom tonight, so congratulations, Jeff. Third place, we have Kathy Bala, Taj Mahal. Kathy's here tonight. And honorable mention, again, it's Carolyn Ryman with I Lost My Hat. Let's see, we'll move on to the advanced color. We have the judges award is Paul Malinowski with Egret's Dream. First place, it's Michael Rhino. So I guess that's myself with Road to the Rockies. Second place, Paul Malinowski with Egret's Dream. Third place, Crystal Craft with Under the Boardwalk. And honorable mention, Jane Richards, who is here tonight, Pelican Launch. Congratulations. Okay, this is, we've got beginner, intermediate, monochrome. We have judges award was Tamara Rimpley with Splish Splash. First place, Gary Hubble with Morning Walk with the Dog. Second place, Tony Lazzari with Mountain Flow. Third place here tonight is Bruce Ryman, Rise to the Heavens. And honorable mention was Tamara Rimpley with Splish Splash. Okay, and now we've got the final batch here. We have, this is advanced monochrome. Judges award, Jane Richards with Kaboom. First place, Jane Richards with Kaboom. We'll just keep stacking them up here for you because they continue. Second place, Jane Richards with Flow and Sculpture. Third place, Candy Herman, Drive by the Brown Palace. And honorable mention, Michael Rhino with No Concert Tonight. So congratulations to all, and thank you everybody for participating in the last competition. Like I mentioned, that last competition was a theme competition. It was motion and leading lines. As far as again, as I mentioned, that the next competition is open, and that is next. I guess that's in June. July 3rd, we have the competition themes are environmental portrait and high key. And then on October 2nd, the themes are light painting and macro. So the competitions, aside from those ones, will be open. Let's see. We'll move on now to our presentation tonight. So again, thank you, Elane Graves, for presenting tonight. Elane's been a longtime member of Lone Tree Photo Club, receiving numerous awards in our club competitions. 2 years ago, she earned her Master of Photography degree through Professional Photographers of America. Also dedicates a lot of her spare time, in quotes, to Lone Tree Photo Club as secretary of the of the board, along with handling membership responsibilities. And as far as her dedication and volunteer work in that, last year she was awarded the Volunteer of the Year award for Professional Photographers of Colorado, again in recognition of the countless hours dedicated to a number of committee responsibilities. So with that, I don't know if anybody has any further questions on anything. If not, we'll go ahead and turn it over to Elane to do tonight's presentation.
All right, first of all, I just want to thank everybody for showing up tonight. I understand that this may not be everybody's cup of tea, but we're going to learn a little bit something different. My experience in the past was primarily spent taking pictures of nature and landscape. And then I kind of moved into the world of shooting a lot of food photography. And I've been learning more about shooting products over the past few months. And one of the things that I found when I started, exploring food photography, one's just because I like to cook, basically. And sometimes it's really cold outside and I don't want to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning to shoot a sunrise. Was that there wasn't a lot of opportunities for learning how to use lighting for those types of subjects, for small subjects that we have. And most of the workshops and classes that I was finding were basically for portrait photographers. But I went ahead and took those classes because you can always learn something. And in those classes, I did learn a little bit about how to use lights in general and how to, light a portrait and to take some of that knowledge and maybe transfer it into lighting smaller subjects. So tonight, what we're going to talk about is lighting smaller subjects and still life, if you want to call it that, because it can, cover a variety of things. Few of the things that we're not going to talk about tonight. I'm not going to talk about lighting portraits. That's a whole different world. We're not going to cover light painting because, again, that is a whole unique skill with blending multiple exposures on images and that type of stuff to create, your final product. So we're not going to go down that route. I'm not going to get into super technical detail with flashes and cameras and how to set all that kind of stuff up because everybody's camera and flash is different. They all work differently. So without your own camera and flash, it's hard to generically tell you what to do. Okay. But what we will talk about, now that we're not going to talk about things, what we will talk about is how to help choose your lighting and configure your lighting in a way using the smallest scenario possible, one flash and maybe some bounce cards, to help create a lighting pattern that's going to flatter your subject and also help tell the story that you're trying to create with your still life image. Now, when we talk about stories, it doesn't have to be difficult. We're not writing a novel. We're just trying to, put light onto a subject and create a scene with that subject that is flattering, that gives you some type of information about a concept that you might be trying to convey. And then how to use lighting to help convey that subject and convey that message that you're wanting to get across. So this talks about our purpose. We're going to discuss how to enhance still life images using appropriate lighting techniques to tell an effective story using minimal equipment. And the key here is going to be minimal equipment. So flattering light is essential to all aspects of photography. It helps tell our story, it creates interest, and draws the viewer's attention to the most important parts of the subject. You can start with a single flash and modifiers, and then as you gain more confidence, you can add more flashes and more lighting into your scene. So we're going to cover tonight, we're going to cover concepts, we're going to cover lighting basics. I'm going to talk about some modifiers, and then we're going to do a short demonstration using a single light and how the lighting affects that subject in different ways as we move the light around the subject. So hopefully Bruce is going to be able to set up a camera for our people joining us on Zoom so that they can see what we're going to see in the room here as well. So why is lighting important? One of the things that's important about lighting is that it helps tell our story. And so I want you to kind of think about for a second, when we look at this scene here, what type of story is it telling? And how is that lighting helping to tell this story? So when I see this image, I see something about, like a relaxing morning, sitting in front of your bay window, having a cup of tea and maybe kind of writing a letter to the grandkids or something like that. And seeing that that soft window light coming in kind of helps put you in that space. You know exactly where it is. You can visualize that, and you can feel that morning sun kind of coming in as you're sitting there in front of your bay window. Yeah, see, we can make stuff up. Lighting is also important because it helps create interest in a scene. So as we look at this image, we can see that there's a hard light coming in because we see it shining on that skull. We see very dramatic lighting in the image that goes along with those candles being burnt out and the skull and that dark Renaissance kind of feeling that you're getting from this image. So this one is a bit darker. You can see where it has some very deep shadows, and those deep shadows really kind of help tell that foreboding kind of feel to the image. Lighting also helps draw attention to your subject. So in this particular image, we can see that there's sunlight, natural sunlight shining in from the back, coming across those tennis courts. And all of those lines, all of those shadows are leading you right to that tennis racket and that tennis ball. By having that sunlight coming through, you know, you get a sense of place with this image. You know, you get that feeling that it's out, you know, you're indoors, but it's, you know, that kind of indoor outdoor sort of feel when you think about a tennis court and playing tennis. So as we look at these three images together, basically, this is kind of, you know, bringing together why lighting is important. Each one of these images, if you look at analyze the lighting that's in them, ask yourself, would the lighting of the bay window look appropriate for the skull and the candles that we're seeing there? It just wouldn't be congruent. It would give you mixed messages about what the maker's trying to say. And the same thing with the lighting on the tennis racket and, you know, and the other three. So I picked these three images specifically because I think they each give you a different sense of feeling when you look at the image. And a lot of that has to do not just with the props that are used in the image, but how the lighting is helping to enhance what those props are there and what you're trying to communicate. So things to consider when you're creating your still life images and how lighting kind of impacts these. So you have several different things to consider, like I have up here, and your ability to light the scene is going to depend on some of these factors as well. So one, what's your purpose? Are you learning how to use your lighting? Are you being creative with it? Is it client work? You might want to have a more solid base on how to use your lighting if you're creating work for your clients and really know how to use that in a professional manner. Two, what's your subject? What's appealing about the subject? What do you want to emphasize? So like we saw in some of those images, especially the dark one with the skull, that beam of light was shining right on that skull, creating that highlight, really drawing your attention to that spot in the image. You can use lighting, spotlights, and that type of thing to really draw your attention to a very particular part of the image when you're creating your still life there. What kind of mood do you want to emphasize with the image? What type of equipment do you have, and do you have the equipment to achieve the look you're going for? When I first started, I didn't have any flashes. I was using window light. So everything was just kind of based off of window light, and it's very versatile, but it also has limitations. And then I moved into a single Godox 8200, and I could do a little bit more, yay. You know, and then once I got comfortable with that, oh, well, I started adding in another light. And next thing you know, I've got a table full of stuff. And that also leads us into your skill level. Do you have the skills to pull off what it is that you're trying to do with your lighting? And that's ties into your practice, your purpose, your creativity. And in the end, it's just all about experimenting and learning how to have fun. You know, when we, as landscape and nature photographers, we go out looking for light. Where is it? Where can I find it? And when you're creating still life images or things inside of your studio, you're creating that light. You're not going out and finding it. It's up to you to create it. So that's kind of why it makes it a little more difficult sometimes, but fun. So when you hear the word flash and studio lights and off-camera flash, what is the first thing that kind of comes to mind? And for me, when I first started using flashes and that type of stuff, this image of this studio is what I thought of. all these big soft boxes and big lights and complicated things that seemed daunting to me. It was kind of scary because I had only been exposed to camp flash and off-camera flash and soft boxes in a portrait setting, in a portrait studio setting. And I know I didn't want that. So if that's what you have in mind, let me challenge you to this next image. And this is what we're going to be working with. So in this image, you see a single light source, a softbox, a simple reflector, and a very simple scene. You can accomplish a lot with just a few items. And the lighting doesn't have to be artificial. You can use natural light through your window. You can use continuous light. You can use a flash. There are certain principles about lighting and storytelling that we're going to talk about tonight that is universal regardless of the type of equipment that you're using to create your light. So it's all about what you do with it after you have it. So some of the important concepts that we're going to cover tonight in our first section is lighting basics, just fundamentals and tools to tell your story. Then I'm going to move into a small section about off-camera flash and modifiers. We're going to discuss different lights, studio lights, flashes, those types of things. We're going to talk about modifiers, where we have diffusers and bounce cards and flags and that type of stuff. And then we'll move into a simple one light demonstration. Lighting basics. We're going to review fundamentals and storytelling. And here we go. We can't have a course talk about lighting without talking about the inverse square law, but I promise you, we are not doing math tonight. And pretty much, I'm going to leave this here for you guys to read. The most important thing to know about the inverse square law is basically that the further your subject is from the light source, the quicker your light is going to fall off. And it falls off at a certain rate. And 90% of the time, you don't care what that rate is. You just need to know that when you move your subject away from the light source, you're losing light. And that's that. That's the simplest explanation. And so here I have a couple of illustrations that I found online to demonstrate that point. And when I was going through some food photography and learning about lighting, as you see in the second image there, the first purple box is to show you that 1x is your distance from the window, and that's where 1x distance and power would be equal. And as you move further away, 2 times the distance from your window, now your lighting power is dropped, down to like a quarter of what it originally was. So again, it is another complicated image of the inverse square law, and all you need to know is the further you are from your light, the less light you have. I know some of my PPA people would be disappointed that that's all I told you about. Cliff would be upset, but that's okay. So this is going to be the meat of our presentation tonight, and it's going to be building your story. And we're going to talk about the source of your lighting. What type of lighting do you have available? Is it artificial versus natural? We're going to talk about mood. What type of light best suits your subject and your story? So creating mood with those lights and how that's different. We're going to talk about types of light that you can use to help create unique looks for your images. So we're going to talk about hard light versus soft light, the characteristics of those, and eventually we'll get into how you create them. And that's a lot of what we're going to cover on Saturday, is a hands-on practice on doing that. And then we're going to talk about the direction of lighting and the different lighting angles that may be most flattering for your subject. And when we get to the one light demonstration at the end of the program, we'll demonstrate how that works. So we'll have a light source and we're going to move it around the subject so you can see how that impacts the subject and what that looks like and why, from a visual standpoint, why is it flattering and not flattering. So building our story, let's talk about light sources. What type of lighting is available to us? So we have both natural and artificial light. Okay, natural light, the pros and cons of using both. Natural light is simple. It's beautiful. It's what we see every day. It's what your eyes are accustomed to seeing. And I think that's why a lot of people think it is so beautiful. It's what we know. It's what your brain knows. It's good for still life. It is great for when you're using it, natural light, especially out of your home. It's north-facing windows provide a really nice soft lighting, whereas where we're at in the country, a south-facing window is going to give you more bright, more intense light. and you're going to create harder shadows with that light. So if you're going to use natural light for your still life photography, it's really important to kind of walk around your home at different times of day, going through, at those different windows and seeing how does it affect your your subject and what you're doing. What does it look like, so that you know what time of day you need to take your pictures. Because obviously at 7 o'clock at night, you're not going to get a lot of light coming in. It's going to be rough. So some of the cons about natural lighting is one, color cast. So at different times of the day, the color of your light is going to change. We all know that shooting sunrise and sunset, we want that blue hour, we want that evening light, we want that warm light. The same thing is going to happen in your home in the middle of the afternoon. That bright sunlight may not always be what you're after. Okay. The other con is that the light changes throughout the day. So in the morning, you're not going to have as much light as you do in the afternoon. You're going to have to deal with clouds passing over and interfering with your light. Trust me, it does. You wouldn't believe it. And the other thing is that it's difficult to control. So, talking about clouds, you can't control that, so you really have to put a lot of effort into finding where that good light is in your home, and then using modifiers to help control that light, depending on the lighting that you're wanting to create. So another thing to keep in mind is that small windows in your home are going to mean that you have a smaller light source. So that's going to impact how your images look versus like great big large bay windows, or sliding doors and that kind of stuff. And depending on the time of day that you're shooting, if you're needing to use modifiers to tame that light, well, you might not have a big enough modifier to cover that sliding glass door to soften up that light so that you're not blowing out highlights and creating super hard shadows on your images. So knowing what sources of light you have available help you determine how you can successfully tell your story. And like we talked about, lights in different, with natural light, different parts of different windows, different areas of your home are going to dictate what time of day you can shoot what subjects. Okay. Artificial light, the pros and cons on that is flexibility and control. With an artificial light, you can put it anywhere in your house. You can take it anywhere with you. And if you have a battery operated light, you can even take it outside. So you have a lot of flexibility. You can control the power. I cannot control the power of the sun coming into my home. I just can't do it. I have to find the right window. You're finding light. You're not you're not necessarily creating it. Control over time, meaning that you can shoot any time of day. So if you want to shoot at night, you can, because you have artificial lights that you can do that with. It's definitely used for all types of photography and still life subjects, especially action. So when you're using your flash, you can definitely freeze motion with that. You can get those shutter speeds. I'm sorry, your flash will help you freeze motion without having to have a super high shutter speed. Whereas when you're working with artificial light, you're going to need a faster shutter speed, and you might not have enough light coming through that window to get that shutter speed high enough and your aperture at the right settings to freeze motion on those splashes and on those pores. So those are different things, to consider when choosing, can I use natural light for this image, or do I need to use a flash for it? Some of the cons on artificial lighting can be cost. You can spend thousands of dollars on lighting. You can get by with I think you can get by with a small, speed light for your camera and a flash trigger for probably $100 to $150, depending on if you buy new or used, So there's a huge range in cost depending on what you want to buy and what you want to learn and what you're intending to shoot, because you don't have to have that big studio if you're just taking a picture of grandpa's watch. The other cons is that some of these lights can be very bulky. They take up a lot of space. I have a very, very small 8x10 bedroom, which is both my office and my studio. So once you put a desk in it and a couple of soft boxes, there's no room to move. So I've kind of been paring down my lighting to, flashes that are small and take up, as little space as possible. And then the other downside is learning how to use the equipment. Some of these flashes and modifiers and attaching them to your camera can be complicated. I know the flashes that I have can do all sorts of amazing things. I only use them for one or two things, and that's perfectly fine. So those are, other things to consider. And like I mentioned earlier, depending on, it doesn't matter if you're using natural light, artificial light, continuous light, certain principles just don't change. How you light the subject, where you position your light, doesn't matter what source you're using. It's all about where you're positioning things. So we're going to move on to our next subject, which is creating mood and what type of light is going to best suit your subject and the story that you're trying to tell. So I have 3 different moods up here. I have high key, neutral, and low key. Now I understand that neutral isn't a mood, but there's always something in between. High key is going to be very light and bright images, and low key is going to be dark and moody. And sometimes, and a lot of times in my situation, I end up shooting stuff that's pretty much in the middle. So that's why I put it in there. So let's take a look at some high key images. High key images are in general very bright. When you look at your histogram, it's going to be shifted more to the right than it is in the middle. You definitely don't want to blow out your highlights, but it's going to be shifted more to the right. And what you're usually doing with a high key image is you're often trying to mimic either morning or afternoon light. You're wanting to create a light and airy feel, happy images, lighter tones, light, bright colors. Oftentimes it's going to mimic natural light. And your shadows are always going to have visible details. And I don't have a little pointer with me, or I would point to some of the shadows in here. Some are more pronounced than others. Bruce, do you have a light? I don't think that's going to help our poor people online, though. Oh, but I can use my mousey online. All right.
Did you take off these photos? Are these?
These are mine. Not every single image in this presentation is mine, but if it's food, you can pretty much bet it's probably mine. Okay, so it's going away, Bruce. Ooh,
Why don't yourself? It's real, yeah.
but I can't see it.
It's not showing up on.
Oh, I have to hold it down.
Yeah,
Okay.
hold the button.
So for those of you in here, and I'll try to follow along at line, if you see like right along the edge of the spoon, you can see the shadow there, and it's very light, but you can see detail in it, as well as on this down here in the vase. There you go. You can see the shine coming through here. And then in these images, they're very, very soft shadows. You can hardly see them around the edges of the plates and in the napkin and stuff. So that's our high key image. We have some shadows, but they're very soft, and you can see the detail within them. And as we move through, it'll make more sense, I promise. So more neutral looking images, okay? So these are suitable for most applications. It's kind of the middle ground between high key and low key. Your histogram is going to have a more even distribution. It's going to kind of be in the middle. Your shadows are going to have visible details, but they're going to be darker. You're going to be able to see them a little bit better than you did in those high key images. So for example, oh boy, let's try to help you guys out online. If you look at this bowl of strawberries in the back, you can see the shadows there. You can also see shadows up front here underneath the edge of this plate, as well as inside the napkin. On the pumpkin muffins here, you can see some shadows here. Notice they're a little bit darker than what we saw in the high key images, but they're still not, you can still see detail in there. And then on our blueberry muffins over here, the famous blueberry muffins, you can see even deeper shadows on here. So they're a little bit darker than we see in the first 2 images, but you can still see detail in the edges here on the board.
Is that when you're doing food, or like I was thinking on Terry's presentation, is that okay to have shadows?
Yeah, sure. Because so shadows are going to also help create movement within your image. So if you didn't see any shadows, then your image ends up looking a little flat, and there's no contrast in it. So one of the things that we do in food photography is not only do you want to layer your images with props and using different colors to dark light, layering your image to build it up. You can also use props that are smooth and rough texture to help create visual interest. Your lighting also helps doing that by having areas of light and shadow to kind of alternate back and forth in between light and shadow to be able to create contrast and interest in the image. So as we move on to more low-key lighting, and yeah, these are mine too. I don't always take food pictures. They're harder to see, but in like the macaroni here, there's some really deep shadows over here. A little harder to see on the on some of these other images. This one, you can see the dark shadows over here. So with our low-key images, you often think of low-key as a little more like evening light. You're mimicking that late afternoon, early evening kind of colors. It's going to give you a more dramatic feel when you use low-key lighting on your images. Your histogram is going to be shifted a little bit more to the left than you would definitely with the high key, but you want to make sure that you're not blocking up your shadows. You still want some detail there. So instead of, I know you guys can't see me online, I'm using my hands. But instead of your histogram being in the middle, you're going to be shifted a little bit more to the left. You're going to see images that have darker tones and rich colors, and you're going to get those deep, well-defined shadows when it comes to your low-key mood. So when we look at all of these images side by side next to each other and we talk about mood, I think it's much easier to see the contrast between a high key, something that's neutral, versus a low key, you know, where that middle ground is and where your extremes are when we look at these three images side by side. Hopefully you can see that you can get a different, you know, you can see how each of these creates a different feel. So next in building our story, we're going to talk about the types of light. So we're going to talk about hard light versus soft light, what that means, what are their characteristics, and how you can use those to help enhance your image. So hard light, I think we often think of harsh light, and hard light is not necessarily harsh light. It's not necessarily the intensity of the light, but more, I don't know if you want to use quality. But a lot of the characteristics of hard light are definitely defined by the type of shadows we create. And so when you're talking about hard light versus soft light, those are where we're going to understand the differences there. So hard light is created by using a small light source. Your shadows are going to have very well-defined edges and an abrupt transition. You typically have a greater distance between your subject and your light source. When you get a hard light images, think of the sunlight. When you're outside in the afternoon, all of your shadows are deep and dark, and they're all crispy lines on the edge of your shadows. And that sun is a million miles away. Okay. Hard light creates drama, and it creates an edgy look to your images. And like I mentioned before, you're going to have deep shadows in those in an image that's using hard light. Soft light, which I think is something that we see in most of the images we think of. You're using a large light source. Large light sources that are typically closer to your subject. Your shadows are going to be diffused with soft edges. And so those shadows definitely tell the difference between soft light and hard light. Abrupt transitions versus really soft edges. Soft light also helps create a feeling that the light is wrapping around the subject and really giving it a more 3D feel. You're going to have a shorter distance between your light source and your subject. It's going to give you a more natural and a more flattering look for a lot of images. And your shadows are definitely going to have more detail. So when you're looking at your hard light versus soft light, keep in mind the larger the light source, the softer the light. And that's going to really kind of impact where you position your light and what type of lighting you're using when you're lighting your still life, your scene. Okay. Moving on. So here I have some examples of hard light. And so you can see the defined shadows that are very dark in these images. They have nice crispy edges, especially like you see in those glasses down there, and a little bit in our product photography here. When you look at those glasses and you look at that hard light, to me, I get that afternoon summer feel, like you're sitting outside having a glass of iced tea or having a cocktail or something, because that's typically when we see that hard light, when we're outside, when we're outdoors. it gives you a really outdoorsy feel. Or from a more artistic standpoint, like in the image in the upper left with the ball, they're using hard light to create a pattern with those shadows. And now the pattern within those shadows is just as interesting as the subject itself. And sometimes it can be more interesting. So even with the glasses at the bottom edge of the screen, if you have glasses that have a lot of like cut glass with different edges and stuff, it'll create really cool patterns in your shadows and add an extra layer of interest to the scene. The other thing that you'll see with hard light and with these shadows here is they lead you to your subject, especially in these the image of the tennis court. You can see the sunlight in the back coming through, leading you directly to those the tennis ball and the racket. So the next set of images we have are examples of soft light. In there, you can see where we don't have defined edges on our shadows. They're very soft and kind of fuzzy. And it doesn't give you the same feel that those hard light images created. This is in a more maybe indoors or something like that. It's not sitting outside in the middle of the sun. And then the classic example of the fruit bowl. No, this isn't my fruit bowl, sorry. But I think of a lot of Renaissance images when I see something like that. They always, to me, a lot of the Renaissance images have that really soft lighting to them. And that soft light to me in this image especially, I think of something sitting in front of a window with the light kind of pouring into your dining room table or something, lighting up your centerpiece or whatnot. So if we look at these images side by side, I think you can really see the difference between the feel that you get from these hard light images on the left versus the softer light that's on the right-hand side, and how, in your mind, kind of think about what a soft light image might look like on the left had you used hard light, and would it really work for that subject. I think with the bowl of fruit, you could probably get away with a hard light versus soft light, but maybe some of the other things, maybe not. It's going to depend on your own personal choices and aesthetics. Moving on. We talked about source, we talked about mood, we talked about types of light. Now let's talk about the direction of light and the different lighting directions we have, and choosing what direction might be flattering for your subject. Front light. The most difficult thing about front light is typically you're between the subject and the light, unless you choose to put it off to the side a bit. The other thing about front lighting is it creates a very flat look. It doesn't give your object a three-dimensional feel. And when we're taking a photograph, we're turning something that's three-dimensional into two-dimensional, but when you look at it, we want you to think it's three-dimensional because we know everything in life is three-dimensional. So when you're lighting from the front, and we'll show you that in our lighting demo later tonight, it just gets a flat look and it doesn't have that three-dimensional feel. Side lighting tends to be your best option. When you're trying to create that 3D image and that look, you want to light things from the side, and even so you can think of a clock in relation to your subject. So you're looking at things like maybe in the 2 to 4 o'clock position, or on the opposite side, maybe 11 to 7 or something like that. So maybe to the front and the side, or maybe from the back and the side, and see how that affects your subject and what looks best. And food photography, a lot of times we will light from an angle that is from the side and to the back. So like a 4 or 5 o'clock position, or maybe like a 7 or 8 o'clock position, and then bring in some bounce cards to kind of help fill the light on the front of the image. But that really kind of helps us bring a three-dimensional look to the image when we're lighting it. Backlight, we kind of talked a little bit about how to mix backlight and side light. Another thing that you're going to use backlighting for is creating silhouettes. So we all know that when we create silhouettes of the mountains, it's when the sunlight is coming from behind. You're going to do the same thing with your still life image. And we know what type of mood we get when we see the mountains backlit from the sun. So you're looking for that same kind of effect You know, you're not looking for the details and the shape necessarily the details of what the object is, but you're creating more of you're looking more of like trying to emphasize the shapes and patterns and stuff. And then top down, I don't use top down a lot. Normally you see top down when you're shooting outdoors and the sun is your light source and it's coming directly in overhead. So it's not always very flattering to your images. There are places where it does work, and that just really depends on your subject and what you're trying to do. So think of, you know, when you're shooting a portrait, if you're shooting a portrait with light coming down from the top and you're creating all those deep shadows, you know, you kind of have your bad guy Dracula kind of feel. It doesn't work for Marilyn Monroe so much. Same thing with your still life images. I wouldn't light a beautiful vase full of flowers from the top down. You know, it just wouldn't be flattering for our subject. So I'm going to go through a couple of images that I shot that we've presented to the club, and we're going to talk about what was the story that I was trying to create. So in the image of the whiskey glass that I titled Simple Man, my vision was somebody coming home from work after a really long day and just wanting a shot of whiskey or a cold drink, a beer or something like that. That's what I kind of had in my mind. That's what I wanted to create. So how I got there. I got there by using hard light, and I wanted to use that hard light because I wanted to mirror the story of having a strong drink. Hard light and strong drink, they kind of, you know, kind of go together. I used directional lighting with the shadows by placing my light behind the glass of whiskey and to probably 7 o'clock, I guess, position from that. I don't know how you want to call it, but I call it 7 o'clock from the subject to create that shadow line with that hard edge to draw you straight to the whiskey on the right side of the image. So that's what I was thinking there. And then I just chose to use a blue backdrop to complement the colors of the orange colors in the whiskey. So that's what I was trying to accomplish. I like to think I did. You can disagree. It's okay. So in this next image that we've seen is the pancakes. And basically that was nothing more than just a simple, let's have pancakes for breakfast, you know. Let's just try to get that classic pancake image with the syrup dripping down. So for this one, what I used was soft diffused light. And as we talked about earlier, soft diffused light kind of helps create that morning feel. It's a little bit, you know, I adjusted my colors to be warmer. The syrup pour, to get that, I needed a higher shutter speed. So I used a flash and a softbox that was positioned again, probably at about the 7 o'clock position. And that really captured those highlights that you see on the edges of the, I need to learn how to use this thing, on the edges of the strawberry and on the drip that's kind of coming down and on the different syrup, the pat of butter, you can see the highlight there, and as well as on the fruit. And that really gives all of those objects that three-dimensional feel that we talked about, creating those specular highlights to give that fruit a fresh look and a fresh feel to it. So kind of wrapping up, building our story here, the things that we covered for you to consider when creating your story and when choosing lighting to create your story is: one, what's the source? What lighting do you have available and what are you capable of using? Two, what is your mood? What type of mood do you want to create, and can you use lighting to help enhance that mood? We talked about the type of light, hard light versus soft light. What are the elements and characteristics of those and how those play into the feel of your image? And then the direction of lighting and choosing an angle that's going to be flattering for your subject. Next, we're going to talk about actual equipment, off-camera flash and modifiers. And so for people at home, I think Bruce is going to set up a camera later and you'll be able to see some of these things. So what I brought tonight is just some different examples of types of lighting equipment that you can use. So I have a small Godox 8200 here, which is kind of like a base level flash, maybe sometimes called a monolight. We also have some more powerful lights in here, and I should probably just continue with my presentation. So for off-camera flash and modifiers, we're going to talk about speed lights and flashes, studio strobes, continuous lights, and then modifiers. So the benefits of using off-camera flash, like we talked about earlier, is that there's flexibility and creativity there. You can create different mood with your lights. You can direct your light much more easily than you can with a window. So now instead of having to move my subject to around my window to provide light for it, I can just move the equipment, the flash itself. I move that flash closer, I can move it away, front, back, side, whatever direction you want. Flashes and strobes are good for shooting still images in uncontrolled environments because you have total control over your lighting. You can freeze action. They're affordable for the most part. You can use multiple lights to create depth. So you can light maybe, your image from the side, put in a backlight, a rim light, just like they do with portraits. They've got the front light, the beauty dish, the backlight for the background, and the hair light to highlight the edges. If you want to go through all that, you can set up a flash and create some amazing images of your still life. But you don't have to. You can start small, and that's what we're going to talk about, just starting small. Like we mentioned earlier, you can control time because you can use them at any day or night, and they're useful in all types of photography. So these are just some visual examples of speed lights and monolights. The benefits is that they're small and compact. They're usually budget friendly. They're great for small subjects because you don't need a giant 56-inch octabox to light one little Gerbera daisy. You can use a smaller light. And we're going to talk, that's one of the things, that we'll look at this weekend is the size of your light in comparison to your subject. They should be comparable. They can be easy to use. They can be complicated. I know my flashes do a lot more than what I know how to use them for, but what I know how to do with them works for my purposes and the subjects that I'm shooting. Some of the drawbacks: you do have limited output, especially with your the little speed lights that you have that you typically put in your hot shoe. You can pull those off. Batteries. You're going to need a few batteries and a few more, and then maybe another set, because flashes go through batteries like crazy. The nice thing about when you get into like your monolight styles is that they do have rechargeable battery packs. So like this AD200 that I have has a battery that just pops out and I can recharge it, and it'll last for a really long time. Yeah, and so does this little AD300 here. This is another battery pack, and it is interchangeable with the AD200. So there's that. So batteries. You also need transmitters and receivers. You have to have some way for your camera to communicate with the flash. A lot of the flashes, when you buy them, will have cords. So they'll have like a little cord that you can plug in, but then you're limiting where you can put it because it has to be tethered to your camera. The other downside is sometimes it's hard to focus or to see what you're lighting. So when you're setting up your settings for your flash, you're going to kill the ambient light in your room so that your flash is the only source of light. And when you do that, it's hard to focus on your subject and it's hard to compose your image there. There are some ways around that we'll talk about in our class. Usually what I do is adjust my ISO, because I know when I'm shooting my scene, I'm going to want my ISO at 100. But when I'm trying to compose it, I'll bump it up to like 18,000 or something like that, just so I can focus and compose and then dial it right back down to 100 before I take my pictures. And that makes it really easy to kind of move there. Some of your flashes have modeling lights, which is really great. I had one of my flashes for probably a year before I realized it had a modeling light on it. So
I just realized with mine last week that it is
yeah.
lovely.
Yeah. See, I don't feel so bad. Same thing here.
It's really helpful.
It is very helpful. The next thing that we have are studio strobes. They're kind of like a step up. They're a little bit more expensive. They're definitely bulkier. And for those in the room with us, I have some that are similar to the example there. I have an Elane D-Light. I have two of these. And you can see that these plug into power source, plug into the wall. They don't have a battery pack for them, although some studio strobes do, especially more modern ones, I guess, these days, and the more expensive ones. Some of the benefits of using a studio strobe is that they're going to last longer. You're going to get a much stronger output from them. And your subject size is not limited. So if I were going to shoot an entire Thanksgiving table setup, I might need a bigger strobe with more power and more light than what I have in a little speed light that's meant to sit on top of my camera flash. You're just going to need a little more power because your subject is much larger at that point. So the larger the subject is, the larger your light source needs to be. Okay. Some of the drawbacks are that they are big and they have limited portability, and they are a lot more costly than the smaller flash units that we have. A lot. You also have continuous lights. So with continuous lights, the benefits there is what you see is what you get. So when you set up your light, you don't have to use a modeling light or anything. They're on all the time, and you can see exactly what you're doing with your light sources. They cover large areas. A lot of them have, a lot of them you can control your temperature, especially with the new LED panels. They're bicolor, so you can set your color temperature in a variety of ranges. And they're really good for video. So if you're shooting video, that strobe is not going to do anything for you. You can't have your strobe just sitting there flashing while you're trying to do a video. I mean, that's just not going to work. I mean, that's common sense, right? Some of the other drawbacks is that they do require AC power. So now you've got cords to deal with, and I will trip over a cord if it is available for me to trip over. You will get light bleed. So what I mean by light bleed is that for example, the room that we're in, we have all these fluorescent lights going on. If I have this continuous light, then it has one color temperature and one look to it, but these fluorescent lights in here have another. And so now I have competing colors in my image that might create problems for me if I can't control that lighting well. The same thing is gonna apply to natural light. You know, natural light is a continuous light, you know. Sun's shining most of the day. We can't turn it on and off for the most part. You know, you can close some curtains. But natural light has the same characteristics as continuous light. You are going to get different colors, different times of day. If you have the lights on in your room, then that could interfere with the natural light that's coming in through your window. So your blue light bulb or whatever color it is on your lamp is gonna, could potentially compete with what's coming in through your window or your other continuous light. Additional drawbacks on these, we talked about AC power and cords, which is both good and bad to me when it comes to AC power. One, you don't have to worry about batteries. Two, you have to worry about tripping. Take your choice. We talked about light bleed and heat. Heat is also another problem with continuous lights, and why a lot of people are moving to LEDs these days. So some of the continuous lights I have, they put out a lot of heat. And if you're trying to photograph food, it's going to dry out quickly. You're going to wilt your flowers. You could potentially cause all sorts of unintentional effects with the heat from those lights. Not to mention just bumping into them and burning yourself if you've had them on for long enough. The LED lights that they have these days, basically, they don't put out heat. And so that's really nice when it comes to those. For myself, my studio is upstairs in my house. So in the summertime, it gets hot on its own. I don't need to add lights to the situation and have a heat stroke. And just like we talked about with natural light, they're not quite as good for action because you're not going to be able to freeze the motion like you will with a flash. Okay. Modifiers. Modifiers are my favorite thing. I have to admit. You can do all sorts of things with modifiers. So if you have a single light source and just a plain piece of white cardboard or foam core from Hobby Lobby, you can put your light on one side, on the left side of your subject, your bounce card on the right side of your subject to fill in those shadows. And now you have basically, what amounts to two different lights on your image. Obviously the light coming from your bounce card is not going to be as powerful, but that's okay because now you're creating dimension with your light and you're not creating the same amount of light and creating a flat image when you're moving that in. You can also use black cards to create a negative fill. Say you have too much light. Well, you can take a card that's black or dark and have that dark bounce into the black, I guess, and you will kind of subtract light from your image if you have too much light in certain areas. Diffusers help create larger light sources. So if you have a very small speed light or flash, once you put that behind a diffuser, now your diffuser becomes your subject. And so if you put that flash behind inside of a 36-inch octabox, that small speed light has now become a large 36-inch light source. Okay, so you're changing the size of your light source and affecting what type of light that you're able to create for your image. Now you're getting that nice soft diffuse light because you have a large light source. And that's what large light sources do. So diffusers can be soft boxes. They can be scrims. You can use diffusion paper. I like using basically what's a scrim which is just a big rectangular frame with a piece of diffusion material on top of it. So for the people online, there's like a square image here. The third image on the second line, that's what a scrim is. Strip lights. Strip lights are soft boxes that are tall and skinny. They're really good for lighting bottles because when you're lighting in reflective subjects, so when you're lighting a bottle that happens to be kind of long and skinny and it's going to be reflective, you're going to see the shape of your light on your subject. And an octabox is not going to create a nice highlight on, if you think of like a wine bottle, you're going to want to light that with like more of a strip light than you would an octabox. Just like if you're taking portraits, you normally don't use a square softbox to take portraits because you want that catch light in the eye to be more of a round because the eye is round, and that's why they use octaboxes for that instead of square softboxes. We have reflectors, we have grids, we have snoots. Those all help provide direction and focus of your lighting. So when you put your light inside of a soft box or just a bare bulb, it just goes all over the place. It doesn't know where to go, just like the sun. It's everywhere. But when you start putting grids on your soft boxes or snoots, then that kind of helps tame that light and give it a direction and a place to go. It's kind of like putting little blockers on the sides of your soft box to help direct the light. Another thing you can use are gels to create special effects, and other things called gobos, which stands for go-betweens. And a lot of times you'll see those when you may see a picture where it looks like somebody's standing and they're standing in front of some blinds, and you see the shadow of the blinds, or you see the shadow of the window, of the window pane, the crosshairs of the window pane, or maybe just even some tree leaves. And I have some leaves here that we'll do a demonstration on with the One Light video and show you how that looks. But a lot of times somebody's not standing in front of vertical blinds or horizontal blinds. It's a piece of cardboard that's been cut to give you that look or that effect. So you can actually create the look of those, of a window, the crosshairs, on the window frame, creating a shadow onto your background with a piece of cardboard instead of an actual window. Yeah, see? And then off-camera flash, different ways that you can manipulate the light. So we've talked about diffusion when we talked about some of our modifiers, and we talked about bounce cards, being able to bounce light back onto the surface from your light source. Another thing that you can do with off-camera flash that is helpful, that you have a harder time with when it comes to like a window light, is feathering your light. So what feathering your light does is, instead of having your light source perpendicular to your subject, what you're going to do is turn it at an angle, maybe a 45-degree angle, maybe 60-degree angle, somewhere between 90 and 0. And that's going to basically create a gradient. And it's going to soften that light hitting your subject. Instead of just being a bright, spotlight on the side, you can create a feathering effect and make that light kind of gradually fall off of the image and really get some nice looks there. And we also talked about flags a minute ago, which is basically using dark surfaces to absorb light in areas where you don't necessarily want it within the image. Let's see, what else do I have? How to choose what type of lighting that you that you want. So especially if you're looking to purchase lighting, what are some of your considerations? One, what's your purpose? Is it hobby or professional? If it's just for hobby, then a small budget and inexpensive light will do just fine. If you're looking to do this more professionally, you might want more higher end equipment because you may have a larger variety of subjects and applications that you need to use your light for. Consider portability. Are you going to be working indoors or outdoors? Maybe both. Maybe you don't know. In which case, something that has the option to be taken not only off camera but with a battery pack might be something that's important to you. Like I said, a jack of all trades. So for me, I have these Elane Chrome lights that I've only used 2 or 3 times. I got a great price on them, and I thought they were going to be great, but they take up too much space in my studio, and they're just not as portable as I would like for them to be. They're great lights. They're fantastic lights. They're just not suited for my situation. They're more light than what I need 90% of the time, which leads us into subject. Are your subjects going to be small? Are they going to be large? The larger your subject is, the more power you're going to need from those lights. So you're going to need something a little bit more powerful where you might need to go into a studio strobe. Most things I shoot are probably, would fit within a 3-foot cube. So I don't need a huge, powerful light that's going to light up Vegas. Although I do have some that are pretty bright. We talked about budget and then longevity. And that was one of the things that I had to learn the hard way. So when you're looking at lights, think about not only what is your purpose today, but what you might use them for in the future. And does the light that you're choosing have a product line that will grow with you? So for example, with the Godox series and the Flashpoint series, they have everything from these small 100-watt, 200-watt lights all the way up to, I don't know, 800 plus and, all sorts of stuff. They also have a wide line of soft boxes and modifiers that go with them. And your price ranges is very, minimum $200 all the way up to a couple $1,000s. So I know that I can grow with that set. No matter what I want to do, my flash triggers that I have today will work on equipment that I'm going to buy tomorrow. It'll work on basic equipment as well as more advanced equipment. And so some of the lighting that I have or that I've gotten in the past, that was one of the drawbacks. I was piecemealing stuff all over the place. And now I have a light that works with one transmitter and another brand that works with another one and another brand that works with something else, and I can't use them all at the same time. And as my skill has grown and I've started to use not just one light but 2 or 3, maybe even 4, I have lights that don't work with each other. So longevity is something to definitely consider when you're looking at your equipment, as well as ease of use. I am a technical person, but I don't want to spend 5 hours trying to waste my time trying to figure out how to use my equipment. I just want to use my equipment and go. I don't want to spend all my time trying to figure out how to use it. And getting started. So some of the basic things that you're going to need to get started with off-camera flash is obviously some type of speed light flash or strobe that is not attached to your camera. One that is strong enough for your purpose but doesn't overpower your situation. One that works with your camera. Triggers, you're going to need some type of equipment to trigger the flash when it's off of your camera. One thing that you can use is something called slave mode. So if you're working with multiple flashes, even though they may not be the same brand, you can use something called slave mode. So when one flash goes off, the other flash triggers at the same time. So I've been able to get away with that with some inexpensive little Yongnuo speed lights that I have. And my Godox 8200, they're not the same brand, so they don't work on the same transmitter and receiver, but when one flashes, the other one will flash. So that works out. Modifiers, you can get soft boxes, you can get diffusion materials. Once we do the demonstration here, people online will be able to see what I mean by some diffusion material and bounce cards, but I have some examples here. I have a simple, describe it for you guys. I have a simple piece of white foam core that I cut a hole out in the middle, and I bought some material online on Amazon. Thank you for Amazon. That is basically the exact same material that they use for your softbox. I have a little softbox down there. You can see the same thing. And I've been able to create a small scrim for tabletop lighting. So now I can have my light source on the outside of this, and I promise people online you'll see this. And now it goes through, and this is my diffusion. And so now I don't have to have a deep softbox taking up that much more space in my small little studio.
I need to make one of those.
And diffusion, I have some of this extra fabric I'll bring Saturday. Diffusion material you can get in, it's inexpensive, or it can be expensive depending on what you get. They usually come in large rolls, that sort of thing. Bounce cards, again, that's as easy as a simple, Dollar Tree foam core. That's my favorite place to go. All right, basics. So when you're using off-camera flash, I created like a little grid hoping to help you guys understand what are your fixed items, your fixed settings when you're using your flashes, and where are your variables, what things can you change. So with natural light, with actually all of these, with any type of lighting, you want to set your depth of field, your aperture to equal your depth of field for your image. What do you want in focus? Okay, and you're going to leave that there. Your ISO can be fixed. I prefer to shoot with the lowest ISO possible at 100 and then change it only as necessary if I need more light in my situation. So when you're using natural light, ISO can be a variable. When I'm shooting with flashes or continuous lights, I'm usually going to keep that at 100 unless I don't have enough power from my flash. If I've maxed out my flash power, then maybe I'll use my ISO to increase my exposure, to get a better exposure for my image. Your shutter speed is going to be your primary variable. Obviously, when you're shooting natural light and you're shooting on a tripod, that is the easiest thing to change. It's not going anywhere. It's a still life image. It's not moving. Your shutter speed can be whatever you need for it to be. And the same goes for continuous light. When you're using your flash is going to have a maximum sync speed. So usually that's going to be anywhere between 1/60 of a second to 250ths of a second. So with flashes, your variable is going to be your flash power. You'll change that to get the proper exposure for your image. Okay. Obviously, you can't change the power of the sun. So if you're working with natural light, that's why that's not a variable. And if you're working with continuous light, you may have some that are adjustable, like some of the LEDs I have. I can't adjust those, but then I have a soft box that you put a light bulb in it, and that's it. Whatever power that light bulb is, that's what you're going to get. So you would have to adjust your shutter speed, or your ISO to change your exposure in those situations. So like I said, this little matrix here is just to kind of help you understand what are your variables, what are your fixed settings, and which ones you might want to change, and in what order. So 1, adjust your shutter speed or power, and 2, adjust your ISO. It's almost 8:30. I don't think I'm going to go through some of these. We'll do a little bit. So I have a few case studies here, and what I've included in these that we've talked about earlier. But what I did was include like a little bit of a lighting diagram so that you can more easily see where the light was in relation to the equipment. So I could do this online. This funky little box in the corner is our flash. Right here, you see this is my scrim. So I did use just a piece of diffusion material, not a soft box, or at least I think. Jane's like, yeah, that's what you did. And over here, you can see on the left side, this is the bounce card bouncing light back onto the image, and then where my camera was in relation to the subject. And I'm gonna go back to here for a second. That bounce card right here, and I know it's kind of hard to see online. You can see it a little bit, I'm sorry, on the computer. Oh, geez, the monitor in the room. You can see a little bit better online, I think. It really kind of filled in the light along the bottom edge of this plate here. And so for our next image, you can see in this one, I did use a soft box. No, I didn't. I lied, because I wouldn't have gotten those hard lines if I'd used a soft box. But I did use a couple of bounce cards, black or white. I don't remember which. But I created basically just a little sliver of space in between those cards to kind of help create that light, because I didn't want a whole lot of light falling on the edges of the image. Some of that is a vignette, but most of it is not. I specifically put in cards to kind of help block the light so that I didn't get the light on those edges. Because before we had Lightroom and created vignettes, people did this manually. It can be done without all the fanciness, you know. Another simple setup here, I use just a snoot and a scrim to soften the light, and then just provide a highlight just right in the center of this clock here. And the bounce card kind of helped fill in the light on this edge of the subject. Again, it's a little bit easier to see on the computer than it is on our big TV screen. This one was really fun. This is actually 2 lights. We used my continuous light here that was super duper bright, even at 1%. And I had to use 3 different layers of diffusion to soften the light down and to tame those highlights that were on that can. And then on the bottom, underneath of it, we had a little LED light, which I have here, that we set to change different colors. And that's what actually lit up the light and create a different color on the can. So that was a really fun experiment that Jane helped me with. And you can see it gets a little complicated, but again, there's just one main light source, and I'm using this card, this white foam core, to bounce light back into the subject to fill in the opposite side of the image from the light. And then finally, this image. This is probably the most complicated lighting setup that I've used today. So this isn't, you know, simple that we're talking about. But what I did to create this, I used 3 different lights, a strip box on each side with with diffusion material to help soften those highlights because they were really bright on the reflective surface of the shoe. And the interesting thing that I discovered while doing this is basically the left softbox was lighting the right shoe, was providing highlight on the right shoe, and the right softbox was providing the highlights on the left shoe. And so as I moved them, I kind of had to do things in opposite directions. And then a little, what do you call them? Reflector with a light and a gel on the background to create the purple background light, because I can't think of words anymore.
To do the shoe, was that a product you were asked to do, or did you come up with that?
It was a personal project.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, all these are personal projects. One of these days I'll find somebody to sell some things
I'm not
to.
sure I would have ever thought of shoes. Otherwise, I don't have one.
I've worn them once.
I have about mine.
I often spend a lot of time on Pinterest and just online. I'll have like a rough idea of what I may want to do, and then I'll just go online and just look at different images and get different ideas in my head, and then kind of start getting those creative ideas kind of flowing, and then start, you know, working with something that I think is similar to an image that I saw, and then kind of moving on from there. The one that we shot with the Truly can here, there was a lady who did a video on that I saw on Instagram. She did like a little quick video and had this, and I thought it was just like the coolest thing. And I just so happened to have one of these in my fridge. So I was like, hey, why not? That looks easy enough. All right. Do we have any questions before we move on to our little one light demonstration segment? It's going to take us about 5 minutes or so to kind of move things around in here and get set up. So take a break, stretch. I will apologize right now for people in the room if I blind you while moving the light around because it's really bright.
I'm gonna get out of there. That's where that needs to be.
Oh, it's going to be moving. It's going to be moving. So, all right. I think
Really,
we are ready to go.
Want the lights off? Or
Yeah, well, you'll be able to see, I think. And I didn't bring that's all right. Okay. So, our little demonstration here. So what I have, for those of you who can't see very well online, this is a small continuous LED. It's a Molus X100. Right now, I have it set to 1%. So this is a powerful little light. It's great. It's really portable. The reason I chose to use the continuous light for you guys tonight is because I didn't want to have to, worry about using the flash, taking with the flash with the camera, tethering and back and forth and having all that delay and trying to demonstrate what we're going to do with the lighting here. So one of the things that we talked about earlier was how light source and directions impact your image and whether or not it's going to be flattering for your image or is it going to create something that's just unappealing. So what we have here is we have a small light source that's creating really hard light on our image. And hopefully you guys online will be able to see soon, but I think the people in the room can kind of see that this really isn't all that flattering. It's not necessarily appealing. Bruce is working on it not being crooked. My little Apple box is crooked, but we're talking about concepts here. So this hard light isn't doing anything for my subject, especially where it's positioned right now. So when we talk about positioning your light and your subject, one of the things to notice is that this small light far away from my subject right now is creating these really long shadows completely across the table. If I raise my light, look at how short those shadows get and what's happening with them. And as it is quite the light. And as I take this light and move it above my image for top down, we can see, well, that doesn't really do anything for this subject either. So I'm going to bring it back down and put it on the floor. And we're going to rotate it around the image. And I want you guys to kind of keep in mind, what does that light look like on the apples? And keep an eye on those shadows, because right now they're completely going out of the picture, and that might not be great for our composition. So I have this on like my little granny rollers.
And real quick in the chat while you're moving, there's Richard Firth asks, what would you have her say again the brand name of the light she is using?
This is a Zhiyun, Zhiyun Molus, MOLUS X100. It's a little continuous LED. And eventually this little fan will kick on. It does get hot. Well, it has a battery pack on it, or you can plug it in with a power cord. So it's pretty sweet. I mean, it's kind of sweet. So but back to the demo. As you can see, as I move my light, those shadows change. And now I'm getting a little bit more light on the front of the subject. Okay, you can see the shadows that it's creating on the light board there. And as I come around, we talked earlier about that front light and how unflattering that front light is. And I'm going to move so people can kind of see. And as we go around, I'm not going to step in front of the camera. And we're just moving the light source around the subject from one side to the other so that you can see exactly how positioning of the light affects what's going on with the image. Now, one thing that we can do to kind of help tame this light is we can add modifiers to it. So what happens if I take some diffusion material, aka scrims, and put that in front of the light? Thank you, sir. So now, if I put this this here, and put this here, now I've created a big old highlight on this side because this is a powerful light. But you can see all those hard shadows have gone away. See those hard shadows on the front of the light and off to the side? Now they're gone. We can still see the shadows, but they're not as hard. They're not as dramatic. They're much softer. So if so as you move your light around the subject, you'll see the same thing kind of happening. So if I move it here, whoops, it's kind of hard to see. Oh no, camera. Okay, I got a little lighting there. That lighting on those apples isn't quite as harsh. Okay, we're going to move it all the way to the other side. All right. Now, typically, when I'm going to light food, I'm going to do it from back here. And I'm not going to use this guy over here because he's very bright. Oops. Nope, Bruce, you leave the camera there. I have a light that I can move. All right. I can just move the light. Okay? So if I were lighting this for a food image, Jane, would you give me a hand, please? You're fine, you don't need to run.
While she's doing that, can you spell the name of that light again?
No, I want you to hold this one for me. Good man, thank you. Zhiyun. So now I'm going to take this bounce card. And if you notice, well, I've tamed my light. I don't have all those hard lights anymore. I have some pretty soft shadows now. That's pretty cool. But the front of my apples have no light. Well, what the heck? That's not any good, right? We'll take this bounce card. And as we move it back into the scene, oh, look at the light. We're getting back on those apples now. Whoops. Now, granted, my camera is probably going to be positioned much closer to exactly how I want my image composed, as opposed to where we have the camera here now. But the point of this is, if I take this away, whoops, why'd you go away? Oh, you're fine, Bruce. Right in here, we have no light on these apples. I'll bring it in, and depending on where I position it, I'm going to just bring it in closer so you can see. Now we have a lot more light back onto those guys. So by just using one light, I can create some nice wraparound three-dimensional lighting for my apples here, and use a bounce card to bring the light back in instead of having to use a light from the front to light the front, a light from the side to give us a little more depth from the side, or something from the back. Okay? Now, another thing that we have here is the diffusion that Jane has isn't quite enough for that bright light, right? I cut my foam core slightly in half, and that makes a nice little V. So when I'm working with it, it sits there on its own. I don't have to touch it. Now, like we said, this light is kind of bright. So what we can do is take this piece of diffusion, and this is a piece of Translum Savage paper. It has more of like a two-stop diffusion on it. And you'll see that it cuts the light that much deeper. So depending on my light source, if it's too bright, I can use more diffusion. Or if it's a much softer light, then maybe I only need one that has maybe like a one-stop or half-stop level of diffusion on it. So those are ways that we can use our modifiers to change our lighting. And now we've turned this small light source into a larger light source by lighting up this bigger piece of diffusion. And that's how we're getting those softer shadows to come in. So give me like a minute here. We're going to change things up again. So this cool little light comes with an adapter. So now I can put a softbox on it. So now we can demonstrate what's going to happen. All right. So now we've added a softbox to this little light, same little light, okay? I've added a softbox to it, which is going to work basically the same as that diffusion material did, okay? I like to use the diffusion material in the scrims because it takes up less space. So I have a 36-inch Godox softbox at home. When you open it up, that thing is probably 2 feet deep. And again, when you're only working with an 8x10 room, you run out of space real quick, and I can't move it very much. So using those scrims work a lot better for me, for my purposes. This little soft box I'm using is a 24-inch Elane box that I have. And right now, our light is still at 1%. I know, it's at 1%, guys. But you can see that we have much softer light than what we did earlier. I have a little bit more shadow in here. Move this back so you can kind of see it. A little bit of shadow, some of the shadows over there, but it's really nice soft light instead of that hard light. And so now we're kind of starting to get to something that might be a little bit more flattering for our subject. And that's the whole purpose of what we're talking about tonight, like how to create light that's flattering for your subject in the easiest way possible with minimal equipment. And let's see, I'm running out of space here, but it's not all that heavy. So I'm going to pick it up and just move it closer, just so that you can see the difference between if I move it farther away, I start losing that light. Remember we talked about, fall off earlier? Thank you. I was like losing words. And then we can move it closer. And again, Bruce, if you want to pick up that bounce card, see the difference it makes, even with the softbox. Now we're getting light back onto that subject, and we're really giving shape to those apples and creating some of those highlights and stuff. Okay. Any questions? That's kind of what I wanted to demonstrate tonight. Oh, what's Jane? What does Jane have for me? Oh yeah, and sometimes this darn little light in the Truly can that we were using, when I said we had multiple layers of diffusion on it, we had a soft box plus some of this material draped over the soft box and another layer draped over it because the intensity of the light was just so much, and it was creating a lot of really bright highlights on the can that we were trying to kind of tame down. So we had to use a few different layers of material diffusion to make that happen. So thanks everybody for joining us tonight. I hope you picked up maybe one or two little tips here and there on from the presentation. If you have any questions, let me know.